I don't think I would have spotted the tactic if it wasn't for my opponent literally like moving his entire body during the game. I played an absolute monster. This is a 2200 12-year-old kid that we're talking about. I mean, I saw his birth year when the pairings were drawn, and to see like 2012 was crazy to me. So anyways, my opponent starts with e4. I have the black pieces, my opponent has white. I go e5, and now knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. My opponent only started playing e4 recently. Used to be a c4 player, the English, and then was a Lopez player as far as I was concerned, and completely surprised me with an Italian. This is what I main as black, so you're kind of going into the lion's den, very ambitious, but he seemed to know theory very well. I go bishop c5, c3, flirting with the push d4, knight f3, and now d3. This is like the closed Italian. And now I go with d6, and now castles and a5. I try a new system here. Usually I go a6. a6 is a good move to fold the bishop back so that when white gets that d4 push, it doesn't hit my bishop, and so I have more time to play against it. But a5 is even more special. Here, I'm preventing a queenside expansion from my opponent with b4, a4, a5. And it's a really aggressive move. Ding Liren has tried this, and I quite like it. So my opponent goes with a4, which is what white usually initiates on the queen side. You might see that white goes with a4, threatening b4 and a5 to trap the bishop, and then white would respond with a6 or then a5. So a4, I go h6, to prepare castling. If you castle now, I believe that bishop g5 is quite strong. So you kind of want to avoid things. You want to go h6 first and then castles. And now h3 is played. And now black has to come up with a plan. So does white. But white's plan is very effortless and very well known. Rook e1, knight f1, and then knight g3. And then possibly stamping a knight on f5. But what does black come up with in this position, right? What do we do? So there's two very known plans, and I go with one of them. So you could go bishop e6, you could go bishop a7. I go with bishop a7 first, so just to prevent the d4 thrusting attacks on the bishop. And after rook e1, this is my plan. I go knight e7. Knight e7 presents a transfer of the knight to g6, and if d4 is played here, then you can go knight g6, or you can play what I played, which is in the Anish Giri course, which we saw together on my Twitch channel. It's knight c6, going immediately backwards and basically telling white, you pushed d4, now I'm gonna pressure the center since I made you push that pawn. But I found myself second doubting myself after d takes was played quickly. I took back with the pawn, and now bishop b5. And suddenly I'm in trouble. The knight is threatened, and thus the pawn is threatened. And how do I defend this? I could counterattack on this pawn. I could try to defend with a measly queen d6, but then there's knight c4 things. I fall into a panic, and rightfully so. In both the line where this is played in the Anish Giri course, the exact line, because this wasn't the exact line, it's knight takes e5, and here too. The idea is that after takes, knight f3, which I thought was like, for sure white can do this and it's a recharge. Well, now I can just swap queens and the rook is off of this e4 protection, and now I can just take. And you can't really take back because I'm taking the f2 pawn, a pawn that you can't take on f7 because of my beautiful knight and bishop. So I kind of embedded that knight takes e5, like quick, was just like helping white unfold their knights. But really, it's the best move. And pawn takes, my pawn becomes an absolute target of the white pieces, and I feel it with bishop b5. Wow. I thought here for a long time, rook e8 is an obvious move to defend the pawn, but it just looks so beginnerish because the bishop is just pinning our knight. You're just giving a free pin to the opponent. That's usually ill-advised in chess. So I go with this really ugly, don't judge me please, queen d6. Queen d6 has per goal that if you go like knight here, let's say, I can just swap queens and then just take here, and black is actually better, right? So there's no knight c4 tempo, and I'm defending this. If you take with the bishop, I'm quite happy. I have the bishop pair, and I'll go like bishop a6, and the rays of bishops here are super beautiful. So my opponent goes with queen c2, a very nice preparatory move. Here you're preparing knight c4, it's very obvious, and this forces me to play bishop e6, and here I'm already very uncomfortable. I've given up the bishop pair after 16 moves. My queen is on a d file that's pretty empty, and more than anything, I have no seeming obvious plans. The classic knight on c6 is being played against this pawn here, and is really good for the white pieces. My bishop is ultra nice, but can just be like traded off from a bishop e3 at any time. My knight here doesn't have that many plans, and I could always improve my position with rooks, but then after that, I have no weaknesses to go on. So it's really difficult for black to play this, whereas white has a lot of room for improvement. b3, bishop a3, rook a d1, some play on the king side, we'll see. Apparently here, the engine wants me to go knight e7, and then transfer my knight to g6, but I just saw that after g6 here, my knight is just as useless as it was on c6. We can really see the parallel between a pawn on the 3rd rank completely blocking and annexing a knight on the 6th rank from any potential squares. So I play rook a d8, and my opponent takes a very long turn and plays this, okay, it's a useful move, g3. It's kind of a slow progressing move. It wants king g3, and it wants to also support this knight h4, and basically tells the black pieces, you have no active plans right now, so I'm just going to play slowly and outplay you. And this is hard for black to play. I can try to prophylactically play against this with bishop c5 now, but I end up playing it when I need to play it. So now I just go with rook fe8, nothing wrong with that, king g2, and now queen c5. This is a huge mistake. This is coming from the fact that I don't have belief in my position. In chess, the desire for results is what will bring you to calculate more than your opponent and even might outplay your opponent. If you don't have the desire for results, or if you don't have belief in your position, this is where it can go downhill from the psychological point of view in the game. And I let myself down here because I was looking and scrambling for plans, like queen c5, which looks like it attacks this bishop, and after the bishop moves on this diagonal, I have the powerful knight d4, which is obvious, like my opponent's 2200, and bishop b3. Here the bishop defends the queen, so knight d4 is not possible because of just takes, so I would have just gone queen d6. That's literally what I was planning to do, and it's basically a draw offer. It's super weak, but that's what I thought was best in this position. Like, I thought that black didn't have better. And so here, I look like a fool after something like b3 is played. I even thought queen e2 after my move is super good for white. You're defending the bishop, but b3 is even better. The b3 just defends this bishop, ameliorates the future positioning of this one, and my queen simply has to go back. It's already not looking good for black. And now white can start their plans, right? Knight h4, threatening knight f5, and now I go bishop c5. I'm playing against this because if I go like knight e7 to try to anticipate this knight here on h4, well then there's bishop a3. And now you can see like the real troubles. So that explains bishop c5. Queen e2. My opponent's playing slowly but progressing his position. It's really scary. And you're playing against a 12-year-old kid who's like during the whole game, so that's like an extra factor. And he's like small, right, on the board, he's 12. I go with g5 here. I panic. I play an obvious bad move that makes obvious weaknesses, but really put yourself in my shoes after these two variations and tell me that g5 does not look like the best move, okay? So first I thought knight e7, because g5 is the last move you play. You do not want to play g5 in your life. You know it's a bad move because it weakens the f5 square and more. But okay, I was looking at knight e7 first, as a good boy would, good boy Zach. But here, queen f6 looks so strong. It threatens bishop takes h6, winning a full pawn on f6 here. And if I go like king here, then I really loved knight f5. It's threatening this pawn once again. It's really annoying. And if I take this, there's queen takes f5 check. If I go g6, I blunder a knight, so I have to move my king anywhere, and then there's bishop takes h6, and I'm down a pawn. Like, it's very scary. Here I missed knight d7. But like, who finds knight d7? It doesn't look that good. The second move I looked at, king h7, but it really transposes after queen f3, and now you're threatening knight f5, you're threatening queen f5 check with the doubts to take this h6 pawn. And it's the same thing. It's like literally the same thing. So I panicked. g5. Knight e7 and then knight d7 was the best way for black. Queen f3, knight f5, I think I just get to play knight e7 and at least trade these knights, but queen f3 is a good move. I thought I was gonna just take on this and queen takes, but the problem is after like queen here, I completely forgot that h6 is hanging. So these little mistakes in my calculation before it actually happens, it's a reasonable mistake. Like not all mistakes happen on the board. Some mistakes happen in the calculation 3, 4, 5 moves down the line. So after this, I go knight h7. Again, very, very passive move, but this is the best move for black, which is, yeah. Knight f5, the knight is in and the knight looks pretty. I have to go knight e7 to try to trade off these knights. Here at this point, I'm just trying to survive this game. It obviously looks bad, and my opponent is obviously gaining confidence, but I just have to, yeah, I have to play through it. Knight e3. My opponent did not want to trade these knights, but could have just improved his position with a crushing h4. On knight e3, it gives me one shot to be a little bit better in this position. And that is with bishop takes e3, bishop takes, and then queen g7, or what I really liked when the super engine said queen g7 just immediately. And here it's a bit more comfortable than before. I looked at knight e3 and I thought I should be scared of knight d5 things eventually if I ever play my knight here. So I went with c6, which is really good for my position, but it's extremely slow and I don't have time to mitigate knight g4 threats right after. Whereas with my queen placed on g7, you know, it would have been better. So on knight g4, my opponent does this. It's like zero poker face. It was the funniest thing. So to be very, very honest with you, like brutally honest, I don't think I would have spotted the tactic if it wasn't for my opponent literally like moving his entire body during the game. Here my opponent is threatening the very sneaky bishop takes f7 here. And when I take back with my queen, knight takes h6 wins my queen. So I had to play rook d6 to defend this twice, and after bishop takes, I could just take back with my queen and be a jolly good fellow. Rook a2 to defend this, because I was also threatening h5 and rook f6. But this defensive move lets me play knight c6, and now I'm scrambling to trade off this bishop. This bishop is so strong. This is the lack thereof of the bishop I don't have. The bishop, light squared bishop that I traded off earlier in the game, we can feel its presence on the board right now. That's why it's important to be conscious of what material you trade off in the minor pieces. Bishop e3. And now I have to trade bishops, and now I go knight b6. Rook d1. Here I have to trade rooks, but after queen takes, yeah, this is just better, eh? Oi. Yeah, I should have played this. For some reason, I played rook f6, which was a tempo move I was happy about, and then queen c5. Taking here, there's like this knight takes c4, which is always annoying, especially here. It's a tough pawn to defend, but I guess after knight c5, it's not all that bad. There's just like a rook that infiltrates that's always annoying. So anyways, queen e2, I go queen c5, rook a d2, and now we feel that open d file that I gave up with rook f6. That's another mistake that you see through. I go knight f8. I'm blocking the d file just a little bit more, getting my king a little bit safer, trying to mitigate the risk. It's not completely winning yet, but yeah, I just have to defend like an absolute lord to save this. So rook d8, I take, rook takes, and then rook d6. I'm trying to trade off this rook here. It's a mistake because after rook b8, it's hard for black not to be extremely passive, right? And just these weaknesses just fall. My opponent plays rook e8, and here the best move is knight takes, but I really, again, did not like this endgame. It's +2 for white, and it's just probably slowly over. I looked at rook d3 here, knight takes, and if rook here, I just lose a piece, so that's not really good. And so I was like, what do I do here? Actually, rook d7 is, yeah, I lose a pawn, but it's, yeah, it's still it's over, but it's still just like a pawn down. But I go rook f6 here, and this is a big mistake. I was down on time, to be fair, and the position is not going my way. But after knight g4, at the end of this game, I'll tell you a fact that will blow your mind. Knight g4 here threatens three things at once. I succumb to this fork here. I go rook d6. Queen d6, giving the exchange was best, but I mean, yeah, it's not going well. Rook takes, queen here. My opponent has a complete kill with queen f3. Even bishop takes f7 can be played. I'll just show the crushing blow. Queen f3 check, king g8, and then rook e7 is completely over because the square just falls. Very cute. But after queen a3, my opponent gets a little greedy, and now I have some counterplay with b5. Queen b4, I trade queens, and then I go like b takes a4, takes, and I go rook d4. Thinking that on knight takes, okay, I can't go rook king g7 because of the fork here, but I can go king h7, but then this gives a pawn. And I realize I'm down 4 pawns in this endgame. There's no way that I stalemate or zugzwang my opponent. It's not gonna happen, so I resign. A fun fact about this game, the black pieces were never even slightly advantageous, not even one move in this game. Not even 0.0 minus 0.001. Not once. So just goes to show that I never had a chance, like as the black pieces. I never created chances for myself. And this mainly could stem from very early on in the game, not really knowing, not remembering the plan here, which is knight takes e5, and black has a really, instead of slight advantage, it's completely equal here. It's really completely equal. It's like drawish, says the engine. And that's big. That's big at this level. I should have known this plan before going into this game, but that's part of it. My opponent prepped me, went into the lion's den of my Italian with black, for which I score very good, and just beat me. He outplayed me little by little, was very patient over the board, and this 12-year-old is a sensation. Like, congratulations. So this leaves me with a very disappointing tournament. I have 2 out of 6 right now. And I'm playing a 1900, another kid, a 16-year-old. And this next kid that I'm playing will mark 8 kids out of my last 18 tournament rounds. Like, absolutely incredible. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully tomorrow is gonna be a comeback. Let's go for 3 out of 7. At least, I need some rating back.